The wind howled through the narrow streets of Boston, carrying with it the sharp bite of a late November evening. Snow dusted the cobblestones, and the city's lights flickered like distant stars against the gray dusk. At the heart of the South End, the Hope Haven Community Center stood as a beacon of warmth, its windows glowing with soft yellow light. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of hot soup and fresh bread mingling with the low hum of conversation and the occasional clatter of metal trays. James Carter, a 38-year-old white American philanthropist, stood at the serving line ladling portions of chicken noodle soup into bowls. His sandy blonde hair was slightly tousled, and his blue eyes scanned the room with quiet focus. Dressed in a simple navy sweater and jeans, he blended in with the other volunteers, though his presence carried an understated confidence. His fair skin was flushed from the warmth of the kitchen, and his hands moved with practiced ease, betraying none of the wealth or influence that defined his public persona. To the world, James was a billionaire, whose name graced hospital wings and university endowments. But here, he was just another pair of hands serving those in need. Across the room, Sophia Nguyen, a 30-year-old African-American social worker, organized a stack of blankets on a folding table. Her dark skin glowed under the fluorescent lights, and her tightly coiled hair was pulled back into a practical bun. Her brown eyes, sharp and discerning, darted between the volunteers and the steady stream of people filing in from the cold. She wore a faded green jacket over a gray hoodie, her movements brisk but deliberate. Sophia's dedication to Hope Haven and her guardedness were palpable. She had seen too many promises broken, too many good intentions turned sour to trust easily. The center was alive with activity. Volunteers bustled about, their voices a mix of encouragement and exhaustion. The line of people waiting for food stretched out the door, their faces etched with the weariness of lives spent on the margins. James glanced up from his station, his gaze on Sophia, as she handed a blanket to an older woman with a gentle smile. Something about her, her quiet strength, her refusal to let the chaos overwhelm her, drew his attention. He stepped away from the serving line, wiping his hands on a towel, and approached her table. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice warm but cautious. Sophia looked up, her expression neutral, but her eyes assessing. She had noticed him earlier, how he moved with purpose, but without fanfare. "We're good here," she said, her tone polite but firm. "Plenty of blankets to go around tonight." James nodded, undeterred. "I'm James, by the way. James Carter." He extended a hand, his smile easy but genuine. Sophia hesitated, her hand pausing mid-motion as she folded another blanket. The name registered immediately. James Carter, the billionaire who threw money at causes like confetti at a parade. She shook his hand briefly, her grip intense but brief. "Sophia Nguyen," she said, her voice clipped. "I know who you are." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly. "Guess my reputation precedes me," he said, trying for humor. Sophia didn't laugh. "It does," she said, turning back to her work. "Thanks for helping out tonight. We need all the hands we can get." The dismissal was apparent, but James lingered, watching as she moved with quiet efficiency. He had met countless people in his years of philanthropy, but there was something different about Sophia. She didn't fawn over or pepper him with questions about his wealth. If anything, she seemed wary, as if his presence was a puzzle she hadn't decided to solve. The crowd thinned as the evening wore on, and the volunteers began cleaning up. James found himself near Sophia again, stacking chairs while she swept the floor. The room was quieter now. The only sounds were the soft clink of dishes being washed in the back and the distant wail of a siren outside. "You've been at this a while, haven't you?" James asked, breaking the silence. "You seem like you run the place." Sophia paused, leaning on her broom. She said, "I've been volunteering here since I was a kid," her tone softening slightly. "This place kept my family afloat when things got rough. I owe it a lot." James nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's something special," he said. "Not everyone comes back to give what they got." Sophia's eyes narrowed slightly, as if searching for an ulterior motive. "Yeah, well, some of us don't have a choice," she said. "This isn't a hobby for me. It's personal." The weight of her words hung between them, and James felt the sting of her implication. He opened his mouth to respond, but she turned away, her broom moving across the floor with steady strokes. James found himself lingering by the door as the night drew close, watching as Sophia bundled up in her coat and scarf. The snow was falling harder now, blanketing the street in white. He saw an opportunity and took it. "Hey, Sophia," he called out, jogging to catch up with her. "I was thinking, maybe we could grab dinner sometime. Talk more about the center and what it needs." Sophia stopped, turning to face him. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were sharp. "Dinner," she repeated as if testing the word. "Mr. Carter, I don't know what you're after, but I'm not here to play nice with billionaires. I've got work to do." The rejection was swift and unequivocal, but James didn't flinch. "Fair enough," he said, raising his hands in surrender. "But I'm not going anywhere. I'll be back tomorrow." Sophia raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "We'll see," she said, before turning and disappearing into the snowy night. Over the next few weeks, James became a regular at Hope Haven. He showed up without fanfare, often arriving early to help set up or staying late to clean. He didn't talk much about himself, which surprised Sophia. She had expected him to flaunt his wealth or drop hints about his connections, but instead he listened. He asked questions about the center's operations, the people it served, and the gaps in funding that kept it teetering on the edge of closure. Sophia watched him closely, her skepticism unshaken. She had grown up hearing stories of her parents' trust in a so-called charitable foundation that had promised to save their small business only to vanish with their savings. The betrayal had left her family in ruins, and Sophia had carried the lesson into adulthood: the rich didn't give without expecting something in return. With his polished demeanor and endless resources, James Carter fits the profile perfectly. Yet some moments gave her pause. One evening, as they sorted donations, James laughed at a joke told by one of the older volunteers, his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. Another time, he spent an hour talking to a young man who had just lost his job, offering not money, but advice on navigating the city's job training programs. These glimpses of sincerity chipped away at Sophia's defenses, though she refused to admit it. One night, as they locked up the center, James caught her off guard with a question. "Why do you do this, Sophia?" he asked, his breath visible in the cold air. "You could be anywhere doing anything. Why here?" She looked at him, her guard momentarily down. "Because this place is home," she said. "It's where I learned what it means to fight for something bigger than myself." James nodded, his expression unreadable. "I get that," he said, "more than you might think." Sophia wanted to press him to ask what a man like him could understand about her world, but his tone stopped her. For the first time, she wondered if there was more to James Carter than the headlines suggested. As December approached, Hope Haven faced a crisis. The building's heating system, already on its last legs, gave out entirely, leaving the center barely habitable in the brutal Boston winter. Sophia threw herself into finding a solution, reaching out to donors and scouring grant applications, but the funds weren't there. The center's director, Maria, said they had less than a month before they'd have to shut down. James, overhearing the conversation, approached Sophia after a long day. "I can help," he said quietly. "I know a few people who could get the heat back on no strings attached." Sophia's instinct was to refuse, but the desperation in Maria's eyes lingered in her mind. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice tight. That night, as she walked home through the snow, Sophia wrestled with her distrust. James seemed genuine, but so had the people who had destroyed her family's trust. She couldn't shake the feeling that his offer was too good. When she arrived at her small apartment, she pulled out her laptop and searched for James Carter. The results were a mix of glowing profiles and scathing critiques. Articles praised his philanthropy, but others whispered of tax shelters and publicity stunts. One blog post buried deep in the search results hinted at a scandal involving a failed real estate deal that had left a community center in ruins. The details were vague, but the name stuck with her: Carter Enterprises. Sophia closed her laptop, her heart heavy. She wanted to believe in James, but the past had taught her to be cautious. As she drifted off to sleep, the question lingered. Could a man like James Carter ever truly understand the stakes of her world? The snow fell thicker now, blanketing Boston in a relentless white shroud. Hope Haven Community Center, already straining under the weight of its failing infrastructure, felt like a ship taking on water. The broken heating system had turned the building into a cavern of cold air, and the volunteers worked in coats and gloves, their breath visible as they served meals to the growing line of people seeking refuge from the winter. Sophia Nguyen moved through the chaos with her usual determination, coordinating volunteers and ensuring everyone had a warm meal and a blanket. Her green jacket was zipped to her chin, and her hands were raw from the cold, but she didn't slow down. The center was her lifeline, her purpose, and she'd be damned if she let it sink without a fight. James Carter was there too, as he had been nearly daily for the past month. He worked quietly at the serving line, dishing out mashed potatoes and gravy with the same focus he'd brought to every task. His presence had become a constant, and while Sophia still kept him at arm's length, she couldn't deny his commitment. He didn't complain about the cold or extended hours, and never asked for recognition. Still, she watched him, waiting for the moment he'd reveal his true intentions. As the evening wound down, James found Sophia in the back office, hunched over a stack of bills and grant applications. The room was dimly lit, the single bulb flickering as if it were ready to give up. She didn't look up as he knocked lightly on the doorframe. "Sophia," he said, his voice low but steady. "I have an idea that could help the center." She sighed, setting down her pen. "If it's another one of your connections, I've already told you I'm handling it." "It's not connections," he said, stepping into the room. "It's money, $1 million to be exact. I can write the check today. No strings are attached. It'll cover the heating repairs, keep the doors open, and give you some breathing room." Sophia's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. $1 million. It was the kind of number that could change everything, but it also set off every alarm in her head. Just like that, she asked, her tone sharp. "You're going to drop $1 million and expect nothing in return?" James leaned against the doorframe, his expression calm but serious. "It sounds too good to be true, but I mean it. The center's doing good work. I want to help." She stood, crossing her arms. "People like you don't just give money away, James. There's always an angle. What is it? A photo op? A tax write-off? Or do you want to feel good about yourself?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "I get why you're skeptical," he said. "I would be too. But this isn't about me. It's about keeping this place running." Sophia wanted to believe him, but the weight of her past pressed against her. She thought of her parents, their dreams shattered by a foundation that had promised salvation and delivered nothing but lies. "I'll need to see the terms," she said finally, in writing. "And I'm not signing anything until the board reviews it." James nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Fair enough. I'll have my team draw it up tomorrow." As he left the office, Sophia sank back into her chair, her mind racing. $1 million could save Hope Haven, but at what cost? She couldn't shake the feeling that James Carter's offer came with a catch she couldn't yet see. The next morning, the news hit like a thunderclap. Sophia was sipping coffee in her apartment when her phone buzzed with a notification from a local news outlet. The headline screamed, "Billionaire James Carter, under fire charity or tax evasion." The article splashed across every major outlet in Boston, accused James of funneling money through his charitable foundation to dodge taxes. Anonymous sources claimed his donations were less about helping people and more about protecting his fortune. Sophia's stomach churned as she scrolled through the article. There were no hard facts, just insinuations and grainy photos of James at high-profile galas, shaking hands with politicians. One line stood out. Carter's recent involvement with Hope Haven Community Center raises questions about his motives. Is this another publicity stunt for the embattled billionaire? She slammed her phone down her coffee, forgotten. She had known James was too good to be true. The offer of $1 million and the late nights at the center felt like a carefully orchestrated performance. She grabbed her coat and headed to Hope Haven, determined to confront him. When she arrived, the center buzzed with volunteers whispering about the news. Maria, the director, pulled Sophia aside. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice low. "Is he using us?" "I don't know." Sophia admitted, her jaw tight. "But I'm going to find out." James arrived an hour later, his expression grim. He carried a folder under his arm, presumably the promised paperwork for his donation. Before he could say a word, Sophia intercepted him near the entrance. "We need to talk," she said, her voice like steel. "Now." He followed her to a quiet corner of the center, where the hum of activity couldn't drown out the tension between them. "I saw the news," she said, her arms crossed. "Tax evasion. Using charities as a front. You expect me to believe your $1 million offer is just out of the goodness of your heart?" James's face hardened, but his voice remained steady. "Those articles are nonsense," he said. "I've been dealing with this kind of thing for years. People see a rich guy giving money away and assume there's a catch. There isn't." "Then prove it," Sophia snapped. "Please show me the books, the receipts, whatever you've got. If you're clean, you shouldn't have a problem with that." He hesitated, and for a moment Sophia thought she'd caught him. But then he nodded. "Fine," he said. "I'll get you everything you need. But I'm telling you, Sophia, this is who I am. I don't play games with people's lives." She wanted to push back, to demand more, but something in his eyes stopped her. A flicker of something, hurt, maybe, or frustration, made her pause. "You'd better not," she said finally. "Because if you're lying, I'll make sure everyone knows." Over the next few days, James delivered on his promise. A courier arrived at Hope Haven with a stack of financial documents meticulously organized and stamped by his foundation's accountants. Sophia spent hours poring over them, with Maria searching for anything that didn't add up. To her surprise, everything checked out. The donations were real, and the tax filings were transparent. If James was hiding something, he was doing a damn good job of it. Still, the news cycle didn't let up. Every day brought new headlines, new accusations. Volunteers at the center began to whisper their trust in James, wavering. Sophia felt the pressure mounting, her doubts clashing with the evidence. She wanted to believe him, but the stakes were too high to take chances. One evening, as they cleaned up after another long day, James approached her again. "I'm heading to Cape Cod this weekend," he said, his tone casual but deliberate. "There's a charity event I'm helping with, small. No press, just people serving food like here. Come with me." Sophia frowned. "Why?" "Because you don't trust me," he said bluntly. "And I want you to see who I am when the cameras aren't around." She studied him, searching for a hint of deception. But his gaze was steady, almost challenging. Against her better judgment, she nodded. "All right," she said. "But don't expect me to be impressed." As they parted ways that night, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something bigger than herself. James Carter was a puzzle, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to solve it or even wanted to try. The Cape Cod air was crisp, carrying the salty tang of the ocean, as Sophia Nguyen stepped out of James Carter's understated sedan. The charity event was held in a modest community hall, its weathered shingles and sagging porch, a far cry from the glitzy galas Sophia had imagined James frequented. Volunteers bustled about setting up tables with trays of sandwiches and thermoses of hot coffee. The crowd was small but diverse, a mix of locals and seasonal workers, their faces etched with gratitude as they lined up for food. Sophia stood near the entrance, her arms crossed, watching James blend seamlessly into the chaos. He wore a plain flannel shirt and jeans, his sandy hair tucked under a baseball cap. He moved with quiet purpose, handing out plates and exchanging small talk with the volunteers. There was no press fanfare, just the steady rhythm of service. Sophia's skepticism, honed by years of distrust, wavered as she observed him. This wasn't the polished billionaire of the headlines. She had agreed to come to Cape Cod to test him and see if his offer to save Hope Haven was genuine or just another act. The financial documents he'd provided had been clean, but numbers on a page weren't enough. She needed to see the man behind the money to know if he was worth trusting. As the afternoon wore on, Sophia joined the serving line, dishing out mashed potatoes next to an older volunteer named Clara, who regaled her with stories of past winters on the Cape. James worked a few stations down, his laughter carrying over the hum of conversation. Sophia focused on the task, but her eyes drifted to him more than once. During a lull, James approached her, wiping his hands on a dish towel. So he said, his tone light but probing, "What's the verdict? Am I still the villain?" Sophia met his gaze, her expression unyielding. "I'm not here to stroke your ego, James. You wanted me to see you in action, so I'm watching. But don't think a few hours of handing out sandwiches erases those headlines." His smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet resolve. "Fair enough," he said. "But I'm not here to change your mind in one day. I want you to see what I'm about." She didn't respond, turning back to the serving line. But his words lingered, and so did the challenge in his eyes. He wasn't backing down, and neither was she. The event slowed as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the hall. Volunteers began stacking chairs, and the last guests drifted into the chilly evening. Sophia helped clear the tables, her thoughts tangled with doubt and curiosity. James's presence here felt genuine, but she couldn't shake the nagging fear that it was all a performance. Then something caught her attention. A young boy, no older than 7, stood near the dessert table, clutching a worn stuffed bear. His clothes were too big, his sneakers scuffed and thin. James knelt beside him, offering a cookie from a tray. The boy hesitated, then took it, his eyes wide with cautious hope. James said something Sophia couldn't hear, and the boy giggled, his face lighting up. Sophia watched as James reached into a nearby box of supplies, pulling out a small pair of gloves. He knelt again, gently wiping the boy's hands with a napkin before helping him slip on the gloves. The gesture was small, almost unnoticeable, but it hit Sophia like a wave. There was no one around to applaud, no cameras to capture the moment. It was just James the boy, and a quiet act of kindness. She felt a pang in her chest, a crack in the armor she'd built around herself. For the first time, she wondered if she'd been wrong about him, not entirely, but enough to make her question her assumptions. As the event wrapped up, James found her near the coat rack, pulling on her jacket. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice soft. "I know it's not your scene." "It's not about the scene," she replied, zipping her jacket with more force than necessary. "It's about whether you're for real." "I'm still not convinced." He nodded, unfazed. "Then I'll keep showing up. At Hope Haven here, Wherever. You'll see. Sophia didn't answer, but as they walked to his car, she felt the weight of his words. He wasn't pleading or pushing. He was there steady and unrelenting. It was disarming, and that scared her more than any headline. The drive back to Boston was quiet, the engine's hum filling the space between them. Sophia stared out the window, the dark coastline blurring past. She wanted to confront him again to demand answers about the tax evasion rumors. But the memory of him with the boy kept her silent. She needed time to process, to reconcile the man she'd seen today with the one she'd read about. Back at Hope Haven the next day, the atmosphere was tense. The news cycle had doubled with new articles speculating on James's motives. Volunteers whispered in corners, and Maria's stress was palpable as she fielded calls from concerned donors. Sophia felt the pressure mounting her own doubts, mirrored in the eyes of her colleagues. She found James in the kitchen, scrubbing pots, with a focus that bordered on meditative. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low but firm. "This place can't afford to be dragged through the mud because of you." He set down the sponge, turning to face her. "I know," he said. "I'm working on it. My team's tracking down the source of these stories. They're baseless, Sophia, I swear." "Then why do they keep coming?" she pressed. "Why does everyone think you're hiding something if you're so clean?" James's jaw tightened, but his eyes were steady. "Because people love a scandal, they see someone like me, someone with money, and assume the worst. I can't change that overnight. But I can keep doing what I'm doing here with you, with the center. That's what matters." Sophia wanted to argue, to push back, but his sincerity stopped her. She thought of the boy in Cape Cod, the gloves, the quiet moment no one else had seen. "Fine," she said finally. "But if this goes south, it's not just you who pays the price. It's all of us." He nodded, his expression somber. "I know, and I won't let that happen." As she walked away, Sophia felt a flicker of something she wasn't ready to name, trust maybe, or the beginnings of it. But the doubts were still there, and she wasn't prepared to let them go. Over the next week, James doubled his efforts at Hope Haven. He arrived earlier, stayed later, and took on the grunt work no one else wanted, cleaning out storage rooms, hauling boxes of donations, fixing a leaky faucet with a borrowed wrench. Sophia watched him, her guard still up, but softening with each small act. James broke the silence one evening as they sorted canned goods in the pantry. "You ever think about what this place could be?" he asked, stacking a can of green beans. "It could do so much with the proper funding and the right people." Sophia glanced at him, skeptical but curious. "Like what fancy programs, big donors?" "That's not what this place is about." "No," he said, shaking his head. "Not fancy. Real. More beds, better food, job training, mental health support. The stuff that changes lives, not headlines." She paused, a can of soup in her hand. "You sound like you've thought about this a lot." "I have," he admitted. "I've seen what happens when places like this don't get their needed support. I don't want that for Hope Haven." His words struck a chord, but Sophia wasn't ready to let him in completely. "We'll see," she said, echoing her response from that first night. But this time, there was a hint of warmth in her voice, a crack in the wall she'd built. As they locked up the center that night, the snow falling softly outside, Sophia felt the first stirrings of something new. James wasn't what she'd expected, which scared her as much as it intrigued her. For the first time, she wondered if trusting him might be worth the risk. The winter deepened, and the storm around James Carter intensified. Hope Haven Community Center, once a quiet refuge, was now caught in the crosshairs of Boston's media frenzy. The accusations of tax evasion had grown louder, with new articles popping up daily, each more sensational than the last. Volunteers at the center began to pull back their trust, shaken by the headlines. Donations slowed, and the phone rang with questions from wary supporters. Sophia Nguyen felt the weight of it all, her loyalty to the center, clashing with her lingering doubts about James. She stood in the center's cramped office, staring at a stack of unpaid bills. The heating system was still broken, and the $1 million offer from James hung in the air like a lifeline she wasn't sure she could grab. Maria, the director, paced nearby, her phone pressed to her ear as she reassured a donor. "Yes, we're looking into it," Maria said, her voice strained. "No, we're not closing. Not yet." Sophia's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. James stood there, his face drawn but determined. He carried a laptop bag, and his flannel shirt was rumpled, as if he'd been up all night. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded, stepping aside to let him in. Maria ended her call and left the room, giving them space. Sophia crossed her arms, her guard up. What now? James, more promises. He set his bag on the desk and pulled out a folder. He said, "I've got my team working on a statement to clear this up. But I need you to know I'm not backing off. The center needs help, and I'm here for it." Sophia's eyes flicked to the folder, then back to him. "Your help's starting to look like trouble," she said. "People are talking. Volunteers are leaving. If this place goes down because of your drama, I'm the one who has to pick up the pieces." James's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "I know," he said. "And I'm sorry it's bleeding into your work. I'm not the guy they're painting me as. Let me prove it." She wanted to believe him, but the pressure was mounting. "Prove it," how she asked. More documents. Another trip to Cape Cod. That's not enough anymore. He leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "Then tell me what it is. Please tell me what you need, Sophia, and I'll make it happen." She held his gaze, searching for a crack in his resolve. But all she saw was determination, and maybe something else, something that looked like genuine care. "I need this place to survive," she said finally. "And I need to know you won't burn it down trying to save it." He nodded, his expression softening. "You have my word." The next day, the situation took a darker turn. Sophia arrived at Hope Haven to find a group of volunteers huddled around a phone, their faces grim. One of them, a young woman named Tara, looked up as Sophia approached. "You see this?" Tara asked, holding out the phone. The screen displayed a blog post with a screaming headline: "Carter's Charity Facade Insider Exposes Fraud." The article claimed to have documents from a former associate of James's detailing how his foundation had funneled money into offshore accounts. The source was named Laura Bennett, a former business partner who had worked with James years ago. Sophia's stomach dropped. She didn't know Laura, but the name carried weight. The article included scans of supposed financial records, though they were blurry and lacked context. True or not, the damage was done. By noon, 2 more volunteers had quit, and a major donor had pulled their funding. Sophia found James in the storage room, organizing boxes of canned goods. "Laura Bennett," she said without preamble, holding up her phone. "Who is she? And why is she trying to ruin you?" James's face darkened as he read the headline. "Laura," he said, his voice low. "She was my partner on a real estate project years ago. Things went south and she's never let it go. This is her way of settling the score." "Settling the score," Sophia repeated, her tone sharp. "This isn't just about you anymore, James. This is about us, the center, the people who depend on it." "I know," he said, running a hand through his hair. "She's lying, Sophia. Those documents are fake. My team's already working to disprove them." "Then why does it feel like you're always one step behind?" she snapped. "Whenever I think you're legit, something like this happens." James looked at her, his eyes steady despite the accusation. "Because that's how it works when you're in the crosshairs," he said. People like Laura thrive on chaos, but I'm not running from this. I'll fight it for you and for Hope Haven. Sophia wanted to push back, but his words carried a weight she couldn't ignore. She turned away, focusing on the boxes to hide her uncertainty. "You'd better," she said, "because I'm not letting this place go down without a fight." As the week progressed, the pressure on Sophia intensified. Colleagues who had once trusted her judgment began questioning her association with James. At a staff meeting, Tara voiced what many were thinking. "How do we know he's not using us?" she asked, her voice trembling. "All this drama, it's hurting the center more than helping." Sophia felt the eyes of the room on her. She stood, her voice steady, despite the knot in her chest. "I don't know everything about James Carter," she said, "but I know he's been here day in and day out doing the work. I'm not asking you to trust him. I'm asking you to trust me. I'll make sure we come out of this." The room was silent, but the tension lingered. After the meeting, Maria pulled Sophia aside. "You're sticking your neck out for him," she said. "I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I," Sophia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. James, meanwhile, brought in his PR team to counter the narrative. They drafted press releases, contacted reporters, and offered to open the foundation's books for scrutiny. But Sophia stopped him before he could go public. "No," she said, meeting him in the center's kitchen. "We handle this our way. I'm not letting your PR people spin this into some feel-good story. If we're going to clear your name, we do it with facts, not flash." James studied her, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "All right," he said, "your call." It was a small victory, but it meant something. For the first time, Sophia felt like she was setting the terms, not just reacting to James's world. She didn't trust him completely, but she was starting to see his resolve, his willingness to let her lead. It was a start. Despite the chaos, Sophia and James found a rhythm at Hope Haven. They worked side by side, their conversations shifting from guarded exchanges to something warmer, more open. James lingered by the door one night as they locked up the center. He said, "You're more challenging than I expected," a half smile tugging at his lips. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You thought I'd be easy to win over." "No," he said, chuckling, "but I didn't expect you to keep me on my toes like this." She smirked, pulling her scarf tighter against the cold. "Get used to it." As they parted ways, Sophia felt a shift inside her. James wasn't just a billionaire anymore. He was a man who showed up, who fought for what he believed in, even when the odds were stacked against him. She wasn't ready to let her guard down completely, but she couldn't deny the growing respect she felt. And maybe something more. The Boston winter tightened its grip, the air sharp with frost, as Sophia Nguyen and James Carter prepared for a late-night outreach at Hope Haven Community Center. The center's volunteers had organized a blanket drive for the city's homeless, desperate to provide warmth as temperatures plummeted. The parking lot was a flurry of activity, with volunteers loading vans with stacks of blankets and thermoses of hot cocoa. Sophia moved with her usual efficiency, checking lists and directing traffic, her green jacket a familiar sight amid the chaos. James was there too, his flannel shirt swapped for a heavy coat as he helped load supplies. He worked without complaint, his breath visible in the cold, as he hauled boxes alongside the other volunteers. Sophia noticed how he interacted with the team, quietly encouraging, never drawing attention to himself. It starkly contrasted the media's portrayal of him as a self-serving billionaire, and it chipped away at her lingering doubts. As the vans rolled out into the night, Sophia and James found themselves in the exact vehicle, a beat-up van driven by Clara, the older volunteer from Cape Cod. The city streets were quiet, the snow piling high on sidewalks, as they headed toward the underpasses and alleyways where people sought shelter. Sophia sat in the passenger seat, her clipboard on her lap, while James sat in the back surrounded by blankets. The first stop was a narrow alley near the waterfront, where a small group huddled around a makeshift fire. Sophia stepped out her boots, crunching in the snow, and began handing out blankets. James followed, offering cocoa and exchanging a few words with each person. His demeanor was steady, unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world to listen. Sophia watched him from the corner of her eye, noting how he knelt to talk to a man with a tattered coat, his voice low and reassuring. It wasn't the first time she'd seen him like this, but tonight it felt different. The accusations, the headlines, the whispers from her colleagues seemed to fade in the face of this quiet, unglamorous work. As they moved to the next stop, Clara turned up the van's heater, casting a warm glow over the interior. She said, "You two make a good team," glancing at Sophia and James through the rearview mirror. "Didn't think I'd see the day when a big shot like you, James, would be out here in the cold with us." James chuckled, leaning back against the stack of blankets. "Not such a big shot out here," he said. "Just trying to keep up with Sophia." Sophia rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a small smile. "Don't flatter yourself," she said, her tone lighter than usual. "You're still on probation." Clara laughed, and for a moment the van was filled with a warmth that had nothing to do with the heater. The night grew colder, the wind cutting through their coats as they reached their final stop, a vacant lot near the train tracks. A small group had gathered there, their faces shadowed by hoods and scarves. Sophia handed out the last blankets, her hands numb despite her gloves. James worked beside her, his focus unwavering even as the temperature dropped. As they finished, the group dispersed, clutching their blankets and murmuring thanks. Sophia and James stood alone in the lot, the van idling nearby. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the city and the crunch of snow under their boots. Sophia glanced at James, her breath visible in the air. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "This isn't your world." He looked at her, his eyes steady under the brim of his cap. "It was my world," once he said quietly. "When I was a kid, my parents lost everything. Bankruptcy, bad investments, the works. We spent a year on the streets, moving from shelter to shelter. I know what it's like to be cold, to be invisible." Sophia froze, her clipboard forgotten in her hands. She had expected many things from James: excuses, charm, maybe even arrogance. But not this. The vulnerability in his voice was raw, unguarded, and it hit her like a gust of wind. "Why didn't you say anything?" before she asked, her voice softer now. He shrugged, shoving his hands into his pockets. "It's not something I talk about. People see the money and the name and assume that's all I am. But I remember what it's like to have nothing. That's why I'm here, Sophia. Not for headlines, not for tax breaks, for this." She stared at him, her defenses crumbling. For the first time, she saw him not as a billionaire or a potential threat, but as a man who had known loss and had carried it with him all these years. It shifted something inside her, a quiet realization that they weren't as different as she'd thought. "I didn't know," she said, finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "You weren't supposed to," he replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "But I'm glad you do now." They stood there momentarily, the cold forgotten, the space between them filled with something new, understanding maybe, or the beginnings of trust. Clara honked the van's horn, breaking the moment, and they headed back to the warmth of the vehicle. But as Sophia climbed in, she carried James's confession with her, a weight that felt both heavy and strangely comforting. Back at Hope Haven, the volunteers unloaded the empty thermoses and folded the remaining blankets. The night had been a success, but Sophia's mind was elsewhere. James's story had lodged in her thoughts, challenging everything she assumed about him. She wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but the center's demands pulled her back to reality. The next few days were a blur of activity. The media storm around James showed no signs of slowing, with Laura Bennett's accusations gaining traction. Sophia felt the strain on the center, the way volunteers hesitated before speaking to her, the way donors' checks stopped arriving. But James was there every day, working as hard as ever, his presence a steady anchor amid the chaos. One evening, as they sorted donations in the pantry, Sophia broke the silence. "What you told me the other night," she said, stacking cans of soup, "about your past. Does anyone else know?" James paused, a box of pasta in his hands. "Not many," he said. "My team, a few close friends. It's not a selling point when trying to build a reputation." She nodded, understanding more than she wanted to admit. "It's not easy carrying that kind of history." "No," he agreed, his voice quiet. "But it's why I keep coming back here. This place, these people kept me going as a kid. I owe it to them to do the same." Sophia looked at him, her guard softening further. She said, "You're not what I expected," the words slipping out before she could stop them. He smiled, a real one this time, not the polished grin of a billionaire. "Good," he said, "because you're not what I expected either." The moment lingered, a fragile thread connecting them. Sophia felt the pull of it, the possibility of something more, but she wasn't ready to name it. Not yet. As the week ended, Sophia made a decision. She called a meeting with Maria and the board, presenting James's offer of $1 million. "I've looked at his books," she said, her voice steady. "They're clean. He's been here working with us, showing up. Let's take the money." The room was quiet, the weight of her words sinking in. Maria nodded slowly. "If you trust him, Sophia, that's enough for me." It wasn't complete trust, but it was a start. Sophia felt the responsibility settle on her shoulders, but for the first time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a choice, one she was ready to make. Accepting James Carter's $1 million donation brought hope to Hope Haven Community Center, but the relief was short-lived. Sophia Nguyen sat in the center's office, sifting through old files to prepare for a grant application. Thanks to James's funds, the heating system was finally being repaired, and the volunteers were buzzing with cautious optimism. But Sophia's mind was elsewhere, caught in the fragile trust she'd begun to build with James. She sorted through a box of dusty records and found a folder labeled Grants and Partnerships, 2010-2015. Curiosity piqued. She flipped it open, scanning the faded documents. Most were standard letters of intent, budget proposals, but one caught her eye. It was a contract between Hope Haven and Carter Enterprises, James's company, dated 12 years ago. The project was a redevelopment plan for the neighborhood, promising new housing and community spaces. But the fine print told a different story. The deal collapsed, leaving Hope Haven with a lien on its property and a mountain of debt nearly shutting it down. Sophia's heart sank as she read further. The center she'd volunteered at as a teenager, the place that had been her family's lifeline, had been gutted by James's company. The betrayal felt personal, a knife twisting in her chest. She thought of his confession in the snow, his story of living on the streets. Had that been a lie too? A way to win her sympathy? She slammed the folder shut, her hands trembling. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and left the office, the documents tucked under her arm. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Sophia found James at the center's kitchen, helping Clara prep for the evening meal service. He looked up as she stormed in, his smile fading at the sight of her expression. "Sophia, what's wrong?" he asked, setting down a cutting board. She held up the folder, her voice shaking with anger. "This, Carter Enterprises. You nearly destroyed this place 12 years ago. How could you not tell me?" James's face paled, his eyes flicking to the folder. "Sophia, let me explain." Explain what? She cut him off, her voice rising. "Did you bankrupt the one place that mattered to me? That you stood here acting like you cared while you hid this?" Clara glanced between them, quietly, slipping out of the kitchen, leaving them alone. James stepped toward Sophia, his hands raised in a calming gesture. "It wasn't like that," he said. "That project, it was a mistake. I was young trying to prove myself. The deal went south and I didn't know how to fix it. I've spent years trying to make up for it." "Make up for it?" Sophia snapped. "You think $1 million erases this? You should have told me, James. You let me trust you, and this is what I get." He looked at her, his eyes filled with something that looked like pain. "I didn't tell you because I was ashamed," he said. "I didn't want you to see me as that guy, the one who screwed up and hurt people. I'm not that person anymore." Sophia shook her head, her throat tight. "I don't know who you are," she said, "and I don't know if I can do this." She turned and walked out, the folder still clutched in her hands. The cold air hit her like a slap as she stepped outside, but it did nothing to cool the anger burning inside her. She needed space distance, anything to make sense of the betrayal. For the next few days, Sophia avoided James. She threw herself into her work at Hope Haven, coordinating volunteers and securing new grants. But the folder haunted her. She couldn't open it again, but its presence constantly reminded her of her shattered trust. James, meanwhile, kept his distance, but didn't leave. He showed up at the center, working quietly in the background, his usual warmth replaced by a somber focus. Volunteers noticed the tension, but no one asked, and Sophia didn't explain. One evening, as she locked up the center, a courier arrived with a small package addressed to her. Inside was a worn leather notebook, its pages yellowed with age. A note was tucked inside, written in James's neat handwriting. "I can't undo the past, but I can show you who I am now. Please read this." Sophia hesitated, then opened the notebook. It was a ledger filled with handwritten entries dating back years. Each page detailed anonymous donations, thousands of dollars, to shelters, food banks, and community centers across Boston. There were no names, no press releases, just quiet acts of giving. One entry stood out: a donation to Hope Haven made 5 years ago, enough to cover the debt from the failed project. She closed the notebook, her chest tight. James hadn't lied about his past, but hadn't told her the truth. The donations didn't erase what had happened, but they showed a man trying to make amends, one step at a time. That night, Sophia sat in her apartment, the notebook on her coffee table. She thought of her parents, their trust broken by a charity that had promised salvation. She thought of James, his confession in the snow, his quiet work at the center. The anger was still there, but so was something else, a flicker of understanding. A question she couldn't ignore. Was he the man who had hurt Hope Haven, or the one who was trying to save it? She didn't have an answer, not yet. But as she stared at the notebook, she knew one thing: she couldn't walk away from him without finding out. The center needed her, and maybe James did too. The Boston winter showed no mercy, its icy grip tightening around the city. As Sophia Nguyen sat in her small apartment, the leather notebook from James Carter open on her coffee table, the pages filled with records of his anonymous donations, stared back at her, a silent testament to a man trying to right his wrongs. The revelation about his company's role in Hope Haven's near collapse years ago had shaken her, but the notebook complicated her anger. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall she'd built against him. Sophia hadn't spoken to James in days, her silence a shield as she wrestled with her emotions. The center was her life, her anchor, and the idea that James had once threatened it felt like a personal betrayal. Yet his confession about his own past, living on the streets, clawing his way back, echoed her own struggles. She thought of her parents, their trust shattered by a fraudulent charity, and wondered if she was letting that old wound cloud her judgment. Outside, the snow fell in heavy flakes, blanketing the city quietly. Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from Maria, the center's director. "Board meeting tomorrow. We need to decide on James's offer. Your call matters." The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders. Accepting James's $1 million meant moving forward with him, at least professionally. Refusing it could doom Hope Haven. She closed the notebook and leaned back, her mind a storm of doubt and possibility. The next morning, Sophia arrived at the center early, her breath visible in the cold air. Now partially repaired thanks to James's initial funds, the heating system hummed softly, a small victory in a sea of uncertainty. Volunteers bustled about, their chatter subdued by the ongoing media storm around James. The accusations of tax evasion and fraud fueled by Laura Bennett's claims hadn't ended, and Sophia felt the strain in every whispered conversation. James was already there, stacking chairs in the main hall. He looked up as she entered, his expression cautious but hopeful. "Morning," he said, his voice low. Sophia nodded, her face unreadable. She said, "We need to talk before the board meeting," gesturing toward the office. He followed her, closing the door behind them. The small room felt smaller with the tension between them, but Sophia didn't flinch. "I read your notebook," she said, her voice steady. "The donations, the anonymous ones. Why didn't you tell me about them?" James leaned against the desk, his hands in his pockets. "Because they weren't about me," he said. "They were about fixing what I broke, even if no one knew it was me. I didn't want credit. I just wanted to make things right." Sophia studied him, searching for a lie but finding none. "You should have told me about Hope Haven," she said, "about what your company did. I deserve to know." "You're right," he admitted, his eyes meeting hers. "I feared you'd see me as the guy who messed up, not the one trying to fix it. I'm sorry, Sophia. I should have been up front." The apology hung between them, heavy but straightforward. Sophia wanted to hold on to her anger, but the sincerity in his voice made it harder. "I'm not ready to trust you completely," she said. "But I've seen what you've done here, what you're still doing. I think we can work together for the center." James's shoulders relaxed, a flicker of relief crossing his face. "That's all I'm asking," he said. "A chance to prove myself." The board meeting was tense, with Maria and the other members poring over James's financial documents and the terms of his donation. Sophia stood at the head of the table, her voice clear as she laid out her case. "James's offer is solid," she said. "The money's clean and it'll keep us running for at least another year. But we need to do this right. No secrets, no surprises. Full transparency." Maria nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You trust him?" Sophia hesitated, the weight of the question pressing against her. "I trust him enough to move forward," she said finally. "He's been here working with us. That counts for something." The board voted to accept the donation with the condition that all funds would be audited independently. Sophia felt a mix of relief and unease as the decision was made. It was a step forward, but the media storm and Laura's accusations still loomed. That evening, James approached her as they locked up the center. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet, "for giving me a chance." "Don't thank me yet," Sophia replied, pulling her scarf tight against the cold. "We're doing this my way. No PR stunts, no spin, just the truth." He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Your way it is." The next day, Sophia and James began planning a press conference to address the accusations head-on. Sophia insisted on leading it, wanting to protect Hope Haven's reputation. They spent hours in the office drafting statements and reviewing evidence to counter Laura's claims. James's team provided financial records, emails, and contracts, all meticulously documented. Sophia was impressed, though she didn't say it out loud. The press conference was held in the center's main hall, a modest space compared to the grand venues James was used to. Reporters crowded the room, their cameras flashing as Sophia approached the podium. James stood beside her, his presence steady but unobtrusive. "Good afternoon," Sophia began, her voice calm but firm. "Hope Haven Community Center has served Boston for decades, and we're here to set the record straight. James Carter's donation is legitimate, fully documented, and independently verified. The accusations against him are baseless, and we have the evidence to prove it. She laid out the facts, her words sharp and precise, while James handed out packets of financial records to the reporters. The room buzzed with questions, but Sophia fielded them confidently, her commitment to the center shining through. James spoke briefly, his tone measured, focusing on his work with Hope Haven, rather than defending himself. As the conference ended, Sophia felt a surge of pride. She had stood up for the center for herself, and despite her reservations for James. He caught her eye as they stepped away from the podium, his expression one of quiet respect. "You were incredible," he said. She shrugged, but a small smile crept onto her face. "Just doing my job." The press conference didn't silence the critics, but shifted the narrative. Donations began to trickle back, and volunteers returned their trust in Sophia, outweighing their doubts about James. The center buzzed with renewed energy, and Sophia felt a weight lift through the road ahead was still uncertain. She and James fell into a new rhythm, their partnership strengthened by the shared victory. They spent late nights planning ways to expand the center's programs, from job training to mental health support. Sophia began to see James not just as a donor, but as a collaborator who shared her vision for what Hope Haven could be. One evening, as they sorted donations in the pantry, James broke the silence. "I don't know if I've said this enough," he said, stacking cans of soup, "but I'm grateful for you, for pushing me, for holding me accountable. It's made me better." Sophia looked at him, her guard softening. She said, "You're not so bad yourself," her tone teasing but warm. "But don't let it go to your head." He laughed, and for the first time, Sophia felt a spark of something beyond trust, a connection that scared her as much as it thrilled her. She wasn't ready to name it, but it was there, growing stronger with every shared moment. As they locked up the center that night, the snow falling softly outside, Sophia glanced at James. "We're not done yet," she said. "There's still a lot of work to do." "I know," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. "And I'm not going anywhere." The words carried a promise, one Sophia was starting to believe he might keep. The press conference had given Hope Haven Community Center a moment of reprieve, but Sophia Nguyen knew better than to think the storm was over. The center hummed with cautious optimism, volunteers returning and donations picking up, but the shadow of Laura Bennett's accusations lingered. Sophia and James Carter had built a fragile alliance, their shared work at the center, forging a bond neither had fully acknowledged. But as the Boston winter deepened, a new threat emerged that would test their resolve like never before. It started on a quiet Tuesday morning. Sophia arrived at Hope Haven to find the front door ajar, the lock broken. Her heart sank as she stepped inside, the smell of smoke hitting her first. The main hall was in disarray, tables, overturned blankets scattered, and scorch marks on the walls where someone had tried to start a fire. The damage was contained, but the message was clear: this was no accident. Maria was already there, her face pale as she spoke to a police officer. "Vandalism," she said, her voice shaking as Sophia approached. "They think it happened last night. Whoever did this knew we'd be closed." Sophia's mind raced to Laura Bennett. Just days after the press conference, the timing was too perfect, undermining her claims. She clenched her fists, anger mixing with fear. Hope Haven was her home, her fight, and someone had tried to tear it apart. James arrived minutes later, his face grim as he surveyed the damage. "This is my fault," he said, his voice low. "Laura's behind this. I know it." Sophia turned to him, her eyes blazing. She said, "You don't know that, though." Her gut told her he was right. But if she is, we're not letting her win. The police took statements and promised to investigate, but Sophia knew they needed more than promises. She and James spent the morning cleaning up, rallying volunteers to salvage what they could. The center was still functional, but the attack had shaken everyone. Whispers of doubt returned, and Sophia felt the weight of their stares. She had vouched for James, and now the center was paying the price. By noon, a private investigator hired by James arrived, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena, who specialized in corporate sabotage. Elena said that Laura's got a history of this, reviewing security footage from a nearby shop. She's careful, but not thorough enough. I'll find something. Sophia nodded, her jaw tight. Do it fast, she said. We can't afford another hit like this. That night, Sophia and James stayed late, repairing what they could. The main hall was dim lit, only by a few flickering fluorescents. But they worked in silence, their movements synchronized. Sophia hammered a new lock onto the door, while James swept up debris, his focus unwavering despite the tension. As they finished, a loud crash echoed from the back of the building. Sophia froze, her hammer still in hand. What was that? She whispered. James grabbed a flashlight from the supply closet. Stay here, he said, but Sophia was already moving, her heart pounding. They found the source in the storage room, a window, shattered glass scattered across the floor. Outside, a figure darted into the shadows, too quick to identify. But the room was a mess, food boxes overturned, and a faint smell of gasoline. Someone had tried to escalate the vandalism, and they'd barely missed their chance. James acted fast, grabbing a fire extinguisher and checking for flames. Sophia called the police, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her. When she hung up, she turned to James, her eyes wide. This is getting out of hand, she said. If Laura's doing this, she's not just after you anymore. She's after all of us. He nodded, his face set. I won't let her hurt this place, he said. Or you. The words hit Sophia harder than she expected, a promise that felt personal. She wanted to push back, to remind him she didn't need protecting, but the intensity in his eyes stopped her. Instead, she nodded. Then we fight back. Together. Elena's investigation moved quickly. By the next day, she had a lead, a burner phone linked to a hired thug who'd been seen near the center the night of the vandalism. The trail led back to Laura Bennett, though the evidence was circumstantial payments made through a shell company, texts arranging disruptions. It wasn't enough for an arrest, but enough to confront her. Sophia and James met with Elena at a coffee shop across town, away from the center's chaos. Laura's playing dirty, Elena said, sliding a folder across the table. She's got money connections and a grudge, but she's sloppy. We can use this to expose her. Sophia flipped through the folder, her anger growing with each page. She's trying to destroy us to get to you, she said, looking at James. Why does she hate you so much? James sighed, leaning back in his chair. We were partners on a project that went bad, he said. I made decisions she disagreed with, and it cost her. She's never forgiven me, and now she's using Hope Haven to hit me where it hurts. Sophia's eyes narrowed. And you didn't think to warn us? I didn't think she'd go this far, he admitted. I should have seen it coming. I'm sorry. The apology was genuine, but Sophia's trust was fraying. Still, she couldn't walk away, not from the center or James. She said, we need to end this before she does more damage. With Elena's help, Sophia and James devised a plan. They would release the evidence against Laura to the press, framing it as an attack on Hope Haven rather than a personal vendetta against James. Sophia led drafting a statement emphasizing the center's mission and resilience. James provided additional documents, including emails that showed Laura's attempts to sabotage other charities he'd worked with. The plan came together quickly, but the risks were high. Laura was unpredictable, and another attack could cripple the center for good. Sophia felt the pressure. Her loyalty to Hope Haven clashed with the danger of standing by James. Sophia stood in the center's main hall on the night of the release watching, as volunteers prepared for another meal service. James was there, helping set up tables. His presence, a quiet reassurance. As the clock ticked toward the press deadline, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "It's done. The evidence is out. Brace for impact." The impact came faster than expected. Within hours, news outlets picked up the story painting Laura as a vengeful ex-partner targeting a beloved community center. The tide began to turn, but Sophia knew Laura wouldn't go down without a fight. As they locked up that night, James turned to Sophia, his expression serious. "Whatever happens next," he said, "I'm here. For you, for the center." Sophia met his gaze, her heart racing. "You'd better be," she said, her voice soft but firm, "because we're in this together now." The words felt like a vow that carried them into the uncertain days ahead. The fallout from exposing Laura Bennett's sabotage was immediate, but it didn't bring the peace Sophia Nguyen had hoped for. Hope Haven Community Center was back in the headlines this time as a victim of a calculated attack. The evidence against Laura, a trail of burner phones, shady payments, and incriminating emails, had shifted public opinion toward the center and James Carter. Donations began to flow again, and volunteers rallied with renewed energy. But the victory was bittersweet, and Sophia felt the weight of new challenges pressing in. The morning after the press release, Sophia arrived at the center and found a threatening email in her inbox. The sender was anonymous, but the message was clear. "Back off, or Hope Haven burns." The words sent a chill through her, not just for the threat itself, but for what it meant. She was now a target. She forwarded the email to Elena, the private investigator, and alerted Maria, but kept it from the other volunteers to avoid panic. The center was finally stabilizing, and she wouldn't let fear undo their progress. James was already at Hope Haven, helping repair the last vandalism damage from Laura's attack. He noticed Sophia's tension immediately, his eyes narrowing as she approached. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting down a paint roller. She hesitated, then showed him the email on her phone. His jaw tightened as he read it, his voice low but firm. "This stops now," he said. "I'm hiring security for the center and getting Elena to trace this." Sophia shook her head, her voice sharp. "No, James. No more of your fixes. I'm handling this my way. The center's my responsibility, not yours." He looked at her, his expression a mix of frustration and respect. "I get it," he said. "But you don't have to do this alone. We're in this together. Remember?" The words echoed their conversation from the night of the press release, and Sophia felt a pang of guilt for pushing him away. But her independence was her armor, and she wasn't ready to let it go. "I know," she said, softening slightly. "Just let me lead on this." He nodded, stepping back. "Your call." The threat wasn't the only pressure Sophia faced. As the day wore on, she noticed a shift among the volunteers. Tara, one of the younger staff members, pulled her aside during a break. "People are talking," Tara said, her voice low. "They're saying you're too close to James, that you're choosing him over the center." Sophia's stomach twisted, the accusation cutting deeper than she expected. "I'm not choosing anyone," she said, her tone firm. "I'm doing what's best for Hope Haven. Always have." Tara's eyes softened, but the doubt lingered. "I know you are," she said, "but not everyone sees it that way." The words stayed with Sophia, gnawing at her as she moved through her tasks. She had fought for the center her entire life, pouring her heart into it, and now her colleagues, her family were questioning her loyalty. The email threat, the vandalism, Laura's vendetta, it was all tied to James, and she couldn't shake the fear that her growing feelings for him were clouding her judgment. As the center emptied that evening, Sophia sat in the office, staring at the threatening email, Her ideals protecting Hope Haven, serving those in need, were at war with the emotions she hadn't dared name. James had become more than a partner in this fight. He was someone she cared about and saw her in a way few others did. But caring for him felt like a betrayal of the center of herself. James knocked on the doorframe, his presence pulling her from her thoughts. "You okay?" he asked, leaning against the wall. She shook her head, too tired to pretend. "Not really," she admitted. "This place is my life, James. And now people think I'm selling out because of you." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You're not selling out," he said. "You're the strongest person I know. If anyone's causing trouble, it's me. I'll back off if that's what you need." The offer was genuine, but it only deepened her conflict. "I don't want you to back off," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. I don't know how to do this, to care about you and still protect what matters to me." James's eyes softened, and he took a cautious step closer. "You don't have to choose," he said. "We can figure this out together. No pressure, no rush, just us." The simplicity of his words broke something open in Sophia. She knotted her throat tight. "Okay," she said, "but we take it slow." James suggested they get away from the center for a few hours the next day. "To clear your head," he said. "No work, no drama, just a break." Sophia was reluctant, but the weight of the past weeks was crushing her. She agreed, and James drove them to a small coastal town an hour from Boston. His apartment there was modest, nothing like the penthouse she'd imagined. It was a single-story cottage, overlooking the ocean, its walls lined with books and simple furniture. The simplicity surprised her, a stark contrast to his public persona. James insisted on cooking, pulling ingredients from a small fridge with a sheepish grin. He admitted, "I'm not great at this, chopping vegetables with clumsy precision. But we could use something normal." Sophia watched him, her guard softening as he fumbled with a pan. "You're full of surprises," she said, a teasing edge to her voice. He laughed, stirring a pot of simmering sauce. "Good ones, I hope." They ate at a small wooden table. The meal was simple, but heartfelt pasta with homemade sauce, slightly overcooked but warm and comforting. The ocean roared softly outside, and Sophia felt the tension in her shoulders ease for the first time in weeks. They talked about small things, favorite books, childhood memories, the way the sea smelled after a storm. It was ordinary, unremarkable, and precisely what she needed. As they washed dishes side by side, Sophia realized something had shifted. James wasn't just the billionaire who'd offered to save the center, or the man with a troubled past. He saw her, showed up, and made her laugh in a way she hadn't in years. The realization scared her, but it also felt like a gift. When they drove back to Boston, their silence was comfortable, not heavy. Sophia glanced at James, his hands steady on the wheel. "Thanks," she said quietly, "for today." He smiled, his eyes on the road. "Anytime." Back at Hope Haven, Sophia threw herself into her work with renewed focus. The threatening email was still under investigation, but Elena's team had tightened security around the center. Volunteers began to rally behind Sophia again, their trust slowly returning as she led with unwavering commitment. James was there too, his presence a constant amid the chaos. They worked together seamlessly, planning new programs and rebuilding the center's reputation. Sophia felt the pull of their connection growing stronger, but she was careful, guarding her heart, even as she let him in. One night, as they locked up the center, James paused by the door. "I don't know where this is going," he said, his voice soft but earnest. "But I know I want you in my life, Sophia, whatever that looks like." She looked at him, her heart racing. "Me too," she said, the words a leap of faith. but we've got a lot to figure out. He nodded, a smile breaking through. Then we'll figure it out. As they stepped into the snowy night, Sophia felt a spark of hope, not just for the center, but for them. It was fragile, untested, but it was there. And for now, that was enough. The air at Hope Haven Community Center buzzed with cautious optimism as Sophia Nguyen and James Carter worked to rebuild what Laura Bennett's sabotage had threatened to destroy. The center's doors were open wider than ever, with new volunteers joining and community support growing. But the shadow of Laura's vendetta lingered, and Sophia knew the fight wasn't over. The threatening email she'd received was still under investigation, and Elena, the private investigator, warned that Laura was unlikely to back down. James, meanwhile, was grappling with a crisis of his own. His company, Carter Enterprises, was in the final stages of a massive real estate deal, a luxury development project worth hundreds of millions. It was a cornerstone of his business, a project he'd spent years cultivating. However, whispers from Elena's sources suggested Laura had connections to the project's investors, and she was using her influence to undermine it, tying James's reputation to the chaos at Hope Haven. One morning, Sophia found James in the center's office, his laptop open to a spreadsheet filled with numbers that made her head spin. "What's this?" she asked, leaning over his shoulder. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "The development project," he said. "It's falling apart. Investors are pulling out because of the media storm. Laura's making sure they see me as a liability." Sophia's jaw tightened. "She's trying to ruin you through us," she said. "This is about more than the center now." James nodded, his expression grim. "I've got a choice to make," he said. "I can fight for the project and pour everything into saving it. Or I can walk away, focus on Hope Haven, and let Laura think she's won." Sophia stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. "That project's your life's work," she said. "You'd give it up for this. For you," he corrected, his eyes meeting hers. "For the center, for what we're building here. It's worth more than any deal." The words hit Sophia like a wave, stirring emotions she wasn't ready to face. She admired his resolve, but the idea of him sacrificing so much for Hope Haven for her felt overwhelming. "You don't have to do this," she said. "We'll find another way." "There is no other way," he said, his voice firm. "Laura's playing a long game. She'll keep coming after the center if I keep fighting for the project. I'm done letting her control the board." The next day, James announced his decision to the board of Carter Enterprises. He was leaving the development project, selling his stake to a competitor at a loss. The news sent shockwaves through the business world, with headlines speculating on his motives. Some called it a retreat, others a publicity stunt. But Sophia knew the truth. It was a sacrifice made to protect Hope Haven and prove his commitment to her. When he told her they were in the center's kitchen washing dishes after a meal service, "It's done," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. "The project's gone. I'm all in here now." Sophia set down a plate, her hands trembling slightly. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "That was your future." He shook his head, drying his hands on a towel. "No," he said. "This is my future. You, this place, what we're doing here. That's what matters." The weight of his choice settled between them, and Sophia felt a rush of gratitude and fear. Gratitude for his sacrifice, fear for what it meant for them. She had spent so long guarding her heart, but James was breaking through piece by piece. That evening, she invited him to her apartment, a small space filled with books and mismatched furniture. It was a gesture of trust, a step toward letting him in. "I want you to see where I come from," she said, her voice soft as she opened the door. "No fancy cottages, just me." James smiled, stepping inside. "I like just you," he said. They sat on her couch, sharing takeout and discussing their dreams for Hope Haven. Sophia opened up about her vision, a national network of centers, each a beacon of support for those in need. James listened, his eyes bright with shared passion. "We could do it," he said, "together." As the night deepened, Sophia felt the distance between them shrink. She leaned closer, her heart racing, and when their lips met, it was simple, unhurried, a moment of truth that felt like a beginning. The kiss was a promise not of grand gestures, but of shared purpose, of two people choosing each other despite the odds. The days that followed were a whirlwind. With the development project behind him, James threw himself into Hope Haven, working with Sophia to plan new programs and secure grants. The center's reputation was recovering, and the community rallied behind them, inspired by their resilience. Sophia felt a shift within herself, a growing belief in what she and James could build together. The threatening email was still a concern, but Elena's team was closing in on the source, and security at the center was tighter than ever. Sophia allowed herself to hope for the first time, not just for Hope Haven, but for her and James. One evening, as they walked through the snowy streets, after locking up the center, Sophia took his hand, the gesture small but significant. "I'm glad you're here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. James squeezed her hand, his smile warm. "Me too." The future was uncertain, but Sophia knew they'd face it together. Laura's shadow still loomed, but their bond was stronger, forged in sacrifice and shared dreams. It was enough to keep them moving forward, one step at a time. The winter in Boston seemed to grow colder daily, mirroring the tension that clung to Hope Haven Community Center. Sophia Nguyen and James Carter had built something fragile but real. A partnership rooted in shared purpose and a burgeoning trust that neither had fully anticipated. The center was rebounding with volunteers returning and donations stabilizing, but the threat of Laura Bennett's vendetta hung like a dark cloud. The anonymous email threatening to burn Hope Haven had left Sophia on edge, and though Elena, the private investigator, was closing in on the source, the uncertainty gnawed at her. Sophia stood overseeing a morning meal service in the center's main hall. The scent of coffee and oatmeal filled the air, and volunteers moved with practiced efficiency, their chatter a welcome contrast to the chaos of recent weeks. James was there too, stacking trays at the serving line, his presence a steady anchor amid the bustle. Sophia caught his eye, and he offered a small smile that stirred something warm in her chest. But the warmth was fleeting, chased away by the memory of the threatening email and the knowledge that Laura was still out there plotting. Elena arrived just before noon, her sharp eyes scanning the room as she pulled Sophia and James into the office. "We've got her," she said, sliding a tablet across the desk. Laura slipped up. The burner phone used for the email was linked to an account she thought she'd buried. "We've got texts, bank transfers, and a voice recording of her hiring someone to vandalize the center." Sophia's heart raced as she scrolled through the evidence. The texts were damning, detailing payments for disruptions at Hope Haven. The voice recording was grainy, but unmistakable. Laura's voice, cold and precise, instructing someone to make it look like an accident. Sophia's anger flared, but so did her relief. This was the proof they needed to end Laura's campaign, once and for all. James leaned over the tablet, his jaw tight. "She's done," he said, his voice low but resolute. "We take this to the police, the press, everyone. She doesn't get to hurt this place anymore." Sophia nodded, but a flicker of unease remained. "She's not going to go quietly," she said. "We need to be ready for whatever she does next." Elena agreed, her tone grim. "Laura's got connections, but she's running out of moves. I've already sent this to the police who are building a case. But you two need to stay sharp. She's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous." Sophia and James spent the next day preparing to go public with the evidence. They worked late into the night, drafting a statement, exposing Laura's actions while protecting Hope Haven's reputation. Sophia insisted on focusing on the center's mission, not James's personal battle. "This isn't about you," she told him, as they sat in the office surrounded by papers and coffee cups. "It's about showing the world what we stand for." James nodded, his eyes steady. "You're right," he said. "This is your show. I'm just here to back you up." The words meant more than Sophia could express. She had spent so long guarding herself against him, but his willingness to let her lead, to trust her judgment, had shifted something fundamental. They were partners now in every sense, and the weight of that realization was both thrilling and terrifying. The press conference was scheduled for the following afternoon in the center's main hall. Reporters filled the space, their cameras and microphones, a stark reminder of the stakes. Sophia stood at the podium, her voice clear and unwavering, as she laid out the evidence against Laura. "Hope Haven has faced attacks, both physical and reputational," she said. "But we have proof that these were orchestrated by Laura Bennett, a former associate of James Carter, to undermine our work. We're here to set the record straight and to reaffirm our commitment to this community." James stood beside her, handing out packets of evidence, texts, bank records, the voice recording. The reporters' questions were relentless, but Sophia answered calmly, her passion for the center shining through. James spoke briefly, focusing on the center's resilience rather than his defense. The room buzzed with energy, the narrative shifting in their favor. Sophia felt relief as the conference ended, but it was short-lived. A reporter lingered, a sharp-eyed woman from a local outlet. "Ms. Nguyen said we've received a tip that Laura Bennett plans to release a statement of her own. Any comment?" Sophia's stomach twisted, but she kept her composure. "Let her say what she wants," she replied. "The truth is out now. We're not backing down." Laura's statement came that evening, a video posted online that spread like wildfire. In it, she stood in a sleek office, her voice calm but venomous. "James Carter and Hope Haven are hiding the truth," she said. "They're using this so-called charity to cover up his failures. I have documents proving his foundation is a front for personal gain." She held up a stack of papers, claiming they showed illegal transactions tied to James's past projects, including the one that had nearly bankrupted Hope Haven years ago. The documents were vague, their authenticity questionable, but the damage was immediate. Social media erupted with hashtags like #CarterFraud trending. Volunteers at the center whispered nervously, and Sophia felt the familiar weight of doubt creeping back. She and James watched the video in the office, the silence between them heavy. "She's lying," James said, his voice tight. "Those documents are fake, just like the last ones. Elena's already working to disprove them." Sophia nodded, but her heart was racing. "This isn't just about you anymore," she said. "She's dragging the center down with you. I can't let that happen." James reached for her hand, his touch grounding. "We'll stop her," he said. "Together." The next morning, the police acted. Based on Elena's evidence, they arrested Laura on charges of conspiracy and vandalism. The news broke just as Sophia and James released a follow-up statement debunking Laura's latest claims with verified financial records. The tide turned again, with media outlets praising Hope Haven's transparency and resilience. But Laura's parting shot came during her arrest, captured by a news crew. As she was led to a police car, she looked at the camera, her voice cold. "No one escapes their past," she said. "Not James, not Hope Haven. You'll see." The words sent a chill through Sophia, a reminder that the fight wasn't over. But as she stood in the center's main hall, watching volunteers rally to prepare for the evening meal service, she felt a surge of determination. Laura's threats were empty now. Her power had diminished. Hope Haven would endure, and so would she and James. The days that followed were a blur of activity. The center buzzed with renewed purpose. volunteers and donors galvanized by the victory over Laura. Sophia and James worked side by side, and their partnership was stronger than ever. They spent late nights planning new programs from job training to mental health support, and their shared vision for Hope Haven was taking shape. One evening, as they locked up the center, James paused by the door. "We did it," he said, his voice soft but triumphant. "Laura's gone, the center's safe." Sophia nodded, her heart full. "We did," she said. "But it's not over. It's never over." He smiled, his eyes warm. "I know, and I'm here for it, all of it." As they stepped into the snowy night, Sophia felt a sense of clarity. The past had left its scars, but also brought her and James together. They were stronger for it, their bond forged in fire. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it as a team, unyielding in their commitment to Hope Haven and each other. A year had passed since the chaos of Laura Bennett's sabotage, and Hope Haven Community Center stood stronger than ever. The Boston winter had given way to a crisp fall, the city's streets lined with golden leaves and the promise of renewal. Sophia Nguyen walked through the center's newly expanded main hall, her heart swelling with pride. The $1 million donation from James Carter and a surge of community support had transformed Hope Haven into a beacon of hope for Boston and communities nationwide. The Bridges of Hope Network. Sophia's dream was now a reality. The center had launched pilot programs in 3 other cities, each offering shelter job training and mental health support. Volunteers bustled about, their energy infectious, as they prepared for the network's official grand opening. The hall was decorated with simple banners, each bearing the logo Sophia and James had designed, a heart-shaped bridge symbolizing connection and resilience. James was there too, his flannel shirt a familiar sight as he helped set up tables for the event. He had become a constant presence at Hope Haven, not as a billionaire benefactor, but as a partner, a collaborator, who rolled up his sleeves and worked alongside everyone else. Sophia caught his eye across the room, and he flashed a grin that made her heart skip. Their bond had deepened over the year, built on shared struggles and quiet moments of joy. The grand opening was a community affair, with hundreds of people filling the hall, volunteers, donors, and those who had found refuge at Hope Haven. Sophia stood at the front, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "Bridges of Hope isn't just a name," she said. "It's a promise to lift each other, build lasting connections, and never let anyone feel invisible." The crowd applauded, their faces alight with shared purpose. James stood beside her, his presence a quiet support. He spoke briefly, his words focused on the center's impact rather than his own role. "This is your victory," he said. "All of you who believed in this place, who fought for it. I'm just honored to be a part of it." As the speeches ended, the crowd mingled, sharing stories and laughter. Sophia felt a surge of gratitude for the center community and James. They had come through fire together, and the scars they carried only made their bond stronger. James pulled Sophia aside as the evening wound down, leading her to a quiet corner of the hall. The crowd's chatter faded, replaced by the soft hum of the heating system, a reminder of how far they'd come. He held a small box in his hand, his expression nervous but determined. "Sophia," he said, his voice low, "I've been thinking about this for a while. You've changed my life, not just with the center, but with who you are. You're fierce, you're real, and you make me want to be better every day." Sophia's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a simple ring with a heart-shaped engraving, a nod to the Bridges of Hope logo. "I want to build a life with you," he said, "not just here, but everywhere. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to pause, the weight of his words settling over her. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes, not from doubt, but from the certainty of what she wanted. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Yes, I will." James slipped the ring onto her finger, and the crowd, sensing the moment, erupted in cheers. Sophia laughed, pulling him into a kiss that felt like a vow, a promise of love, partnership, and a future built together. As the celebration continued, a man approached Sophia and James, his face weathered but kind. He introduced himself as Tom, a former construction worker who had found shelter at Hope Haven. "I owe you both," he said, his voice rough with gratitude. "This place gave me a second chance." Sophia smiled, her hand still clasped in James's. "That's what we're here for," she said. Tom hesitated, then added, "I used to work for Laura Bennett years ago. She was tough, but I never thought she'd go as far as she did. You proved her wrong." The mention of Laura sent a chill through Sophia, a reminder of the lingering shadows. Laura was gone, her influence broken, but her final words, "No one escapes," their past echoed in Sophia's mind. She looked at James, his hand steady in hers, and felt the weight of their shared history. The past had shaped them, scarred them, but it hadn't defined them. Sophia squeezed James's hand, her voice soft but resolute. "The past doesn't get to win," she said. "We do." He nodded, his eyes warm with love and determination. "Always." As the night drew close, Sophia and James stood outside the center, the autumn air crisp against their faces. The city sparkled under a clear sky, its lights a testament to the hope they'd built together. Bridges of Hope was more than a network now. It was a movement, a legacy they would carry forward. Sophia leaned against James, her heart full. She said, "We've got a lot of work ahead," her voice teasing but warm. He laughed, pulling her close. "Good thing I'm not going anywhere." They stood there hand in hand, the future stretching out before them. The past would always cast its shadows, but their love, their trust, their shared purpose would be the light that guided them forward. Hope Haven was their beginning. They would build bridges to a better tomorrow together.